Before the palace polish, before the fairy tale branding, before the crown-adjacent speeches, there was a version of Meghan that never made the edit. And the man who knew her first has been sitting on the truth. This story doesn't begin with a prince. It begins with patterns. Long before royal headlines and curated vulnerability, Meghan Markle was already rewriting herself, discarding chapters, people, and entire lives the moment they stopped serving the climb. And the one person who saw it all before the cleanup? Trevor Engelson.
Yes, thank you so much.
Ex-husband, her first husband, Trevor Engelson. And you are not going to believe
what Meghan wants, Meghan gets. And what Meghan doesn't want, Meghan throws away. That line doesn't sound like gossip, it sounds like a warning. They met in 2006, 5 years together. Married in 2011, divorced by 2014. That's the neat timeline, but neat timelines are usually lies wearing good makeup. Trevor didn't just know Meghan before fame. He knew her before the reinvention, before the erasures, before the PR-approved version stepped into the light. Back then, she was hungry, not hopeful, hungry. The kind of hunger that doesn't wait for permission, the kind that studies rooms, memorizes faces, and learns quickly who matters and who doesn't. According to people who knew them, Trevor wasn't blindsided by success, he was slowly sidelined by it. When Suits arrived, distance became the official excuse. Toronto filming, career momentum, growing apart, the usual lines. But watch closely how the exits happen in this story. Quietly, efficiently, without drama. No public fights, no messy statements, just silence.
If I get pregnant, I'm an up-and-coming actress. I need to snap back fast, so you are required to...
Rumors say she mailed him back his ring. A ring. In the mail. For someone who later lectured the world on compassion, that detail landed heavy with the people who remembered the old version. And then, almost instantly, the next chapter appears. A blind date. A prince. A faster upgrade. Enter Prince Harry. While the public was told this was destiny, Toronto insiders whisper something else. Logistics. Timing. Opportunity. During her Toronto years, Meghan wasn't just filming, she was networking in rooms that didn't appear on call sheets, rooms where introductions mattered more than ursums, where access was currency. This is where the word run enters the story, a term well known in Toronto nightlife. And suddenly, the narrative shifts from innocent actress to something far more calculated. According to multiple accounts, Meghan wasn't just attending elite gatherings, she was organizing them, hosting, curating the guest list, moving through rooms like someone in charge. Soho House wasn't just a club, it was a filter, a cocoon for power, secrecy, and transactional relationships. To outsiders, it looked exclusive. To insiders, it was strategy. And Meghan understood strategy. People who were there say parties weren't parties. They were auditions with no scripts. You didn't go to relax, you went to be seen, remembered, and ranked. And in those rooms, the rules were different. Allegations floated openly. Nothing written down. Names protected. Silence enforced by mutual interest. What makes this explosive isn't just the behavior, it's the pattern. Because Trevor saw this pattern early. He watched friends disappear, calls go unanswered, invitations stop. People weren't confronted, they were erased. That's the part outsiders miss. There's no screaming, no fallout, just sudden irrelevance. A social death that leaves no fingerprints. And here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Those cut off rarely spoke, not because nothing happened, but because speaking meant accepting how disposable they had become. Usefulness expired, relationship over. That's the rule. Observers have long pointed out timeline inconsistencies too. Dates that shift, ages that blur, stories that subtly evolve with each retelling. Was it coincidence or narrative management? Some believe the past was deliberately softened to fit a fairy tale arc. A younger, naive heroine plays better than a seasoned climber. Paperwork can disappear. Photos can be scrubbed. But memory doesn't cooperate. Toronto remembers. Hollywood remembers. Ex-friends remember. Ex-lovers remember. And Trevor Engelson remembers everything. He didn't just lose a marriage, he watched a transformation. The version of Meghan he knew became obsolete the moment a higher platform appeared. And when the upgrade arrived, the old life was quietly deleted. Take what you need, leave the rest behind. That's the rule this story keeps circling back to. Trevor's silence isn't ignorance, it's restraint. And restraint in this world is louder than denial. Because reinvention only works when everyone agrees to forget. And that's a dangerous gamble. Because people compare notes, and patterns don't lie. What people misunderstand about reinvention is this: it only works if everyone agrees to forget at the same time. And that never happens. Because while headlines move on and narratives refresh, the people left behind don't vanish. They watch. They remember. They wait. And eventually, silence stops being loyalty and starts becoming pressure. Trevor Engelson sits at the center of that pressure, not because he's spoken loudly, but because he hasn't. Those closest to the situation say Trevor didn't just witness ambition, he witnessed calculated detachment, the slow emotional withdrawal that happens when someone is already living 5 moves ahead. By the time the marriage ended, the next chapter wasn't being imagined, it was already underway. And here's the part that rattles people. None of this appears accidental. From Toronto to Hollywood to royal proximity, the trajectory looks disturbingly clean. Too clean, like a ladder climbed rung by rung with deliberate precision. Each relationship, each room, each platform serving a purpose, and once that purpose expired, so did the connection. This wasn't chaos, it was curation. Former acquaintances from the Toronto years described 2 versions of the same person. The public-facing advocate, speaking softly about kindness, feminism, mindfulness, and the private operator, keenly aware of leverage, access, and hierarchy. In private spaces, ideals were flexible. Outcomes were not. That's why so many relationships didn't end with explosions. They ended with erasure, calls unanswered, messages unread, photos quietly disappearing, entire social histories wiped clean, not messy, surgical. And that's what unsettles people most, because chaos leaves evidence. Precision doesn't. When critics point this out, the defense is always the same: jealousy, bitterness, resentment. But patterns don't care about motives. They repeat whether people like it or not. And when enough former friends, collaborators, and insiders tell eerily similar stories, coincidence starts losing credibility. What also unnerves observers is how adaptable the narrative becomes depending on the audience. Victim when vulnerability sells. Survivor when sympathy is required. Trailblazer when power is the goal. Each version deployed flawlessly. Each challenge deflected by reframing the accuser instead of addressing the claim. It's a strategy that works frighteningly well until it doesn't, because over time, people start noticing the gaps, the missing years, the rewritten timelines, the selective memory. Why do certain eras remain hazy? Why do some names never get mentioned? Why do entire chapters feel scrubbed instead of resolved? Witnesses don't disappear, they age, they grow quieter, but they don't forget. And that's the risk of building a life on controlled perception. You can manage headlines, but you can't manage lived experience. You can delete posts, but you can't delete conversations that already happened behind closed doors. Trevor Engelson represents the unedited version, the era before the filters, before palace-approved language, before vulnerability became branding. He saw the hunger raw, not softened, the ambition unpolished, the willingness to burn bridges without looking back. And that's why his silence carries weight, because silence suggests confidence. It suggests someone who knows that time does the talking eventually, that people circle back, that truths don't need to shout when enough fragments start aligning on their own. The irony is brutal. The very skill that enabled the climb, the ability to shed skin effortlessly, may be the thing that exposes the cracks. Because when too many discarded people start comparing notes, the story doesn't need embellishment. It assembles itself. That's already happening. Not in press releases, not in interviews, but in whispers, in resurfaced memories, and timelines being quietly re-examined. Reinvention works best when no one remembers the original, but too many people do. And once memory collides with image, discomfort sets in. The feeling that something doesn't quite align, even if you can't articulate why. That unease is what follows polished interviews. It's what lingers under carefully staged vulnerability. It's what keeps resurfacing despite the branding. And it all circles back to one uncomfortable truth: this wasn't luck. It wasn't destiny. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Strategic decisions made early. Choices that prioritize proximity over loyalty, advancement over attachment, outcome over sentiment. And for a long time, it worked flawlessly. But reinvention has an expiration date. Because the past doesn't stay buried forever, it waits. And when it resurfaces, it doesn't need to accuse. It just needs to exist. Trevor Engelson doesn't have to say a word. His presence in the timeline is enough. A reminder that before the fairy tale, there was a blueprint. And blueprints don't vanish, they get reused. So the question isn't whether the past will resurface. It's when enough people decide silence no longer serves them. And when that moment comes, the truth won't arrive screaming. It'll arrive quietly, confident, undeniable. Because patterns don't lie. People do lie. People do lie. People do.